Rachel, are you going to tell us when we're ready? Okay, we're recording now, Rachel. Okay, I'd like to call the regular council meeting of April 27th to order. First is the approval of the agenda. Councillor Sullivan, Councillor Brown, all in favor? Carried. Adoption of the minutes. Recommend that council adopt the following meeting minutes: April 6th and April 9th. Councillor Spruill and Councillor Kettler, all in favor? Carried. Recommend that council receive the following meeting minutes: Advisory Planning Commission held February the 13th. Councillor Spruill, Councillor Brown, all in favor?
Can we speak to them for a minute?
Yes.
So a couple of things. First, just noting that we have an application in front of us later in the agenda that was sent to the APC, but we don't have those minutes in front of us. And I understand there was a timing thing and a rush, but just noting that. And also, I just appreciated the comments from the APC on the bylaw, the zoning amendment bylaw, particularly the stuff about the roadside stands and additional residential dwelling suggestions in the VCM, the downtown village core multi-use 1 zone. And I'm wondering when we will, like, so those comments have come to us. Will they be included in a staff report coming back to us? Or are we discussing them at some later date? I did watch the APC meeting, the most recent one, and there was feedback from Joanne as well that was useful. And so I'm just wondering how we'll see that, if we'll see that information again, or is this it? I guess is my question.
Yeah, they're making recommendations to council, so council has to approve what their recommendations, if we want to include them or not. Am I correct, Clayton?
Yes, Your Worship. So there will be a report back on the upcoming agenda in relation to the minutes that happened during that. So we will, they will report back on those as soon as possible here, as soon as we get a chance to turn those minutes around. And so I would expect possibly one of the next 2 meetings that should be in front of council.
Okay, and so the minutes that are included in this package with all that feedback on the bylaw, will that be incorporated into the bylaw report that comes back to us?
We can report, but we'll find out. I don't know the answer to the exact timeline of that, but we will.
Yeah.
We'll make note of that and report back on that as well.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Moving on, presentation of financial statements. Recommend that council receive the 2019 audited financial statements report, and recommend that council receive the delegation of Corey Vanderhorst, CPA, CA from MNP LLP to present the auditor's report to the council for the year end December 31st, 2019. It's Councillor Brown, Councillor Spruill, all in favor? Carried.
Good evening, council. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. The attached to your council report are the Village at Cumberland audited financial statements for the year ended December 31st, 2019, and it's for council's approval tonight. So I'll just give you a high level kind of overview of the statements. And then our auditor, Corey, will come on and present his auditor report to you, which will have a fair amount of other types of information in there as well. And then Corey and or myself can answer any questions at the end if you have any about the financial statements as well. So just to note that the statements were prepared by staff in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles for local governments as recommended by PSAB. And also, as mentioned before, and as when you delegation, the audit firm MMP was appointed by council to do the external audit. And on page 11 of my report, I've outlined all of the statements and schedules and supplementary information that's available in the attached statements attached. So you have four financial statements. And you have some notes attached to those that provide you more supplementary information about the details in those statements. And then you have 4 schedules that are to the financial statements that provide even more information for you. Now, so then I can just give you a little bit of a high overview of them. You have the statement of financial position that reports out on your accumulated surplus balance. And you'll see in that statement that the accumulated surplus is quite large. It's $61 million. And that's because it includes your tangible capital assets. So I always recommend that you actually have a look at your note 16 in your notes to your financial statements. And that gives you like a breakdown of your accumulated surplus by type. So and provides far more better information for you. So you will see on that statement though that the operating funds decreased by $2.3 million, and that's quite unusual for the village. But then you will look further down and see that the reserve funds increased by $3.9 million. So this is a result of your reserve and surplus fund policy that you adopted, and the reserve funds that you established by bylaw during 2019. So we were saving a lot of those funds in the general accumulated surplus, and during 2019 they were transferred over to those reserves. So it's a normal explanation for that decrease. Also, the statement of operations and accumulated surplus, it shows an annual surplus of $4.3 million, and that's compared to your 2018 $5.9 million. And so really just what I'd like to point out is that the information you get usually quarterly. I will give you your annual surplus as per your financial plan. That's quite valuable information. There's 4.3 million, you know, it actually includes things like amortization and things like that. And it isn't as valuable as your financial plan. That's what I use during the year to do my variance analysis to make sure we're on track for our financial plan. And so the surplus for 2019 for your financial plan is $315,612. Then that's and of course that's compared to 2018, which was just under just over $600,000.
May I ask which page we're on, Michelle?
Oh, I'm on page 12 of the agenda.
Okay, all right, good. I'm there too. Yeah, okay, thanks.
You're good. Okay. And yeah, just stop me if I'm not being very clear here. I can get better. You're in a net financial asset position at the moment, $2.8 million, and that's very similar to previous years. So that's a good position, but you are budgeting to go into a net financial debt position. And we just haven't actually moved forward with the full on the projects that were budgeted to put us into a net debt position. Lots of municipalities go into a net debt position though. But currently we are in a net financial asset position. And that's really just what I have to say about the financial statements. I can answer any questions, and Corey as well will present his auditor statement, and then we can both answer questions at the end.
Does anyone, Councillor Kettler?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great, thanks. So Michelle, on page 27 of the agenda, there's the finances on the long-term debt. And there's an A and a B. So the B is principal payments on debenture and long-term debt over the next 5 years. And then it's got 2020 to 2024. So it's around 300,000 per year, except for 2021, which is 1.77 million. So I'm just wondering why the discrepancy there between years, and how we're planning on paying that debt.
So that 1.7 is our short-term construction debt, moving into long-term debt for the water supply project. So next year end, you'll see that smoothed out, and you'll have proper payments over the 5 years for that debt when it becomes long-term. The other thing is that is, I think council has chosen to pay that back through a parcel tax. And so that once we go to debt and we have exactly what the debt payments will be over the next 10 years, I'll come back to council with to ask you what kind of parcel tax you would like to charge out for that.
So it will get evened out over in the next few years. Is that correct?
Yeah. So right now it's just showing that the short-term debt is going to be paid off, and then but we're going to be paying it off with long-term debt. So the long-term debt will replace that, and and the payments for that long-term debt will come into the statement.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Anyone else? Councillor Brown?
I just have to find it now. Again. So it's the net financial assets, that last. I just thought for clarification, if you could explain what it means to be balancing the current and future taxpayer contributions to funding asset development.
Yeah, sure.
Can we, what page are we on? Can you say what
Sorry,
page?
back to 12.
Mhm.
All the way back to 12 under net financial assets.
And just for clarity, the auditor explains this much better than I do, and he's
Oh, well, okay. I'm happy to wait for Corey then if you want.
okay. It just, what it means is when you borrow for these big projects, of course, you're paying that over the next 20 years. So future taxpayers are going to be paying for today's event, right? If you put things like, there's a balance between the two, because if you put lots of reserves away and buy this big project now, and you don't have to borrow it, then past taxpayers are going to be paying for that big project now. So it's just, so what my statement there, it's just a balance, and it's a council choice, really, a balance between the two. Going between how much of the past is going to pay for today's expenditures or how much of the future. And it's all about what you think when people are using it, because we're replacing the asset now, and so people are going to be using it over the next whatever years, or people have used it in the past. And so it's really, that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I just thought that was a valuable thing for the public to consider when we're looking at these types, particularly when we take on a bunch of debt and then we're funding it over a long term and what that looks like. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, is Corey there?
Yes, hi, I'm here.
Hi. Oh, it's nice to see you. I didn't think you were going to come on.
Yes, nice to see you, Madam Mayor. Rachel, I am gonna try and share my screen. Can you see the front page of my presentation?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, that's good. Thank you, everybody, for having me here today. So I will, I'll run through some of the presentation and slides here, and I think we'll probably end up where we just, we'll get to where that conversation just went, because some of the slides will hit on that concept of debt and future and present taxpayers. But there's three areas I'm going to talk to today. One,
Just a
I'll
minute,
give.
Corey, can I,
Sorry, go
I'm
ahead.
sorry to interrupt you, but now I can only see the screen. So members of council, could you please write your questions down and save them for the end of the presentation, because I can't interrupt and ask them to stop talking. So let's wait until the end of the presentation, if everybody's okay with that.
Okay, great.
Okay.
Thank you. So three areas that I'll touch on. I'll touch on another sort of high-level overview of the financial statements, like Michelle just went through. The middle chunk, I'll talk about the audit and what we do in an audit and that type of stuff. And then I'll end with some analysis, looking at the past 5 years of financial activity at the village, and sometimes it kind of gives you an idea of where are you going, where are you trending with certain things. So I will dive right in, because I am very cognizant of your time and other things you have on your agenda. I do apologize if you can hear that in the background. I have a very hungry toddler who does not want to eat her dinner. So a reminder that what you're seeing in the financials here is what we call a consolidated basis. So the general water, sewer, capital, and reserve funds all showing together here, as opposed to what you're going to be used to seeing in your quarterly reports from Michelle, where some of that stuff might have been broken out. So when we look at the consolidated level, this is your statement of financial position at the end of December 2019. This is also called your balance sheet sometimes. So you can see $13.4 million in cash and investments, most of that tied up in reserves and deferred revenues. A total financial assets, so we add your accounts receivable in, we get 14.7 million. You've got $4.5 million of debt, 11.9 of total liabilities. So when we add in the other regular trade payables and wages payable, things like that. So when we take the 14.7 and subtract off the 11.9, we get what we call that net financial asset position that Michelle was talking about, of having positive liquid assets. The physical assets that the village has, 58.1 million. You can see an increase of just over $4 million year over year. And then the accumulated surplus is 61 million. Now that does include the physical assets in there. So a large chunk of that accumulated surplus is in physical assets, is in road, water, sewer, buildings, vehicles, things like that. On the income statement side, so the activity for the year, again, these are prepared in accordance with public sector accounting standards. There's amortization in here. There are accrual entries that take you away from that cash basis or how you are thinking when you're looking at budget. So there's $11 million of revenue, $11.3 million of revenue. I think these actually might be flipped. 6.9 of expenses, and annual surplus of 4.3 million. Then the next page in your statements is what we call the change in net financial assets. You'll see 3.9 million purchase of capital assets and some significant developer contributions throughout the year that add to your asset base. That would be any new subdivisions coming online and bringing on road, water, sewer, street lighting, or sometimes it's actually property. On the cash flow side of things, looking first at the operations of the village, bringing in about 6.1 million, very consistent with the prior year. 3.9, as I mentioned, used to purchase capital assets. a net transfer into some of the investment accounts of 171,000, and some of the debt that was used to fund some of the capital is a cash inflow of 1.4. So there's a net cash inflow of 3.4 million for the end of 2019. The accumulated surplus number of 61.1 million, I did mention the significant amount of that is 53 million in your physical assets, 5.6 million set aside in reserves, and just shy of 2 million in your operating fund there. And I think this is the shift that Michelle mentioned as well, of moving into reserves and setting aside some of those funds for future projects. So I'm going to shift gears now, and I apologize, we can come back to questions at the end, into some of our audit discussion. We are providing what we call an unqualified opinion. So that's auditor speak for a clean audit opinion. We are satisfied that your financial statements are not materially misstated. We're ready to sign our audit report and hand it back to you. The final step being council approval. The minor outstanding matters there were all dealt with over the last few days. So it's really just council approval of the financial statements tonight that is the final item for our audit process. In the audit findings report that is also in your package, you'll see we talk about what does an auditor do. So a few things. We look at the controls in place at the village to make sure that we think you're getting an accurate reporting of financial results. Again, we look at how they're designed and implemented. We don't necessarily test effectiveness. So I'm not here to tell you that I think your controls are effective. I'm here to tell you I think your numbers on the page are accurate. We sample the transactions throughout the year to form our audit opinion. We don't look at every transaction that's not feasible under for the cost benefit of an audit. What we do is we use this number of materiality to drive our audit work. So that's calculated as a percentage of your annual revenue. And what that means is we look at every transaction that's over $400,000. So most of the time that's large capital projects. And then underneath that we sample to give ourselves comfort that your financial statements are not misleading. And if we found anything that was unusual or weird or we wanted to have adjusted, I can't have anything over $400,000 left unadjusted and still give you a clean audit opinion. In the course of the audit, we didn't find anything weird and unusual, no evidence of conflict of interest, unusual related party transactions, or anything illegal or questionable. We're not specifically fraud investigators in the context of the audit, but if something came to our attention, I would have to report back to council, and so that I was sure that you were aware of it. So that is a no news is good news type of statement there, that we're not aware of anything. And I'm not bringing anything to your attention today. I'd like to formally acknowledge the assistance from your staff. I know Audit puts in a lot of work to build the financial statements, and Michelle and her team and the entire staff, really, because we're not just talking to finance, we're talking to everybody. So a thank you to all of them for all the work that they did to put this audit together. It was not an easy year for the audit, for sure. On the Wednesday of the audit, we packed up and left. It was March 16th or 17th, right when COVID was, when we were all being told to go home. So we packed up our audit and finished it remotely, and that was not easy. And I really do think that Audit and Michelle rolled with the punches as much as they could and helped out. So yeah, it was a great thing to have that assistance. Our independence, I always have to confirm our independence, that MMP didn't do any other projects with the village this year that would impair that independence and the ability of us to give you an independent audit opinion. So that independence period covers from January 1st, 2019, all the way to today's date of April 27th. And shifting gears for the last time, I'm going to end on a little bit of financial analysis, looking at trends of the last 5 years of some of these ratios that we look at. I'm going to start with sustainability. So here we compare your assets to your liabilities. We're looking for a ratio greater than 1. You want to have more assets than liabilities. This ratio is steady. It's at about $6 of assets for every $1 of liability. It's fluctuating between 6.1 and 7.7 for the last 5 years. There's no sort of trend there. There's just an up and down. But again, it's above $1, so that's a positive. The next one that we key in on is the financial assets to liability. So this one takes out all those physical assets and just looks at the cash and receivables and things that are liquid. Here again, we want it to be above 1. that means that you have financial resources available to finance future operations or future projects. If it dips below 1, and that gets into that net debt position, then you're into taxing in the future or other revenue generation in the future to pay for the past. So it's currently 1.23. It's trending downwards, and I think as Michelle mentioned, that with some new debt and other projects coming online, this could move below 1, and you get into that scenario where you're now taxing or generating other revenues to pay for some of the debt payments. The next area, flexibility. So here we focus in on what are you paying in interest on that debt, and we compare that to the revenue. So you're bringing in all the revenue throughout the year through taxes and other means. The public debt charges, the interest you're paying, it has increased from 2018 to 2019 from about 0.79 to just over 1% last year. So that reflected the new debt coming on for some of the projects, and there's some increasing interest costs as revenue was not as much change. So over the past 5 years, this ratio generally has been moving around anywhere from 0.79 to 1.64. As you take on new debt for projects, you would expect this to climb. And the reason we call it flexibility is as you get more and more into the debt, if you get too far into the debt, you lose the flexibility of use of funds because you're paying a lot of interest on that debt. The second ratio we look at in flexibility is we look at the physical assets. You are maintaining assets, road, water, sewer, buildings, infrastructure that is important for the community. So we look at what's the rough age of that infrastructure. Again, this is not a full asset management plan. This doesn't look at condition assessment or anything like that, but it looks at how old are the assets, what are the risks of major pieces of infrastructure needing to be replaced soon. And your staff has a much better sense of that than I do. I know they're working on that. But we look at the carrying value, or what we call the depreciated value of capital assets, and compare that to the original cost. It's around 72% right now, consistently with the prior year 71.8. It's been slowly trending upwards from 66.1 in 2015 to 72. So that's showing me you're getting ahead of the curve on some of that asset replacement. Some of those big projects that are coming online, the age of your assets is getting younger, which is a positive. But you need a bit of a balance there between how you're financing or how you're funding those assets. But this drive from 66 to 72, that's healthy in terms of keeping that infrastructure in place. The last area that we look at on the financial analysis is vulnerability. So here we look at your outside sources of funding, specifically government funding, federal government or provincial government funding. And oftentimes it fluctuates significantly with some of the capital projects that you're undertaking. So the ratio of government transfers to total revenues has consistently been around 25 to 35% for the last 5 years. The 2019, it was 25%. We see this, again, fluctuate wildly in years where there's some large infrastructure funding coming through from the federal government, or you're using gas tax money or some of those things, it tends to jump up. Really, the high years show us large capital project years. So thank you. That's a lot to go through and unpack. I'm happy to answer any questions along the way. And before we get there, I will stop sharing so we can see everybody properly. There we go.
Okay, does anybody have any questions? Hands up. Councillor Sullivan?
Just to say that I think that's the first time I've ever heard anyone say that our assets are getting younger. So that's good news. Yeah, that's a positive uptake there. We're trending in the proper direction for that. So that's great.
Yeah.
Anyone
absolutely.
else? Anyone else? No? Well, Corey, thank you very much for all the work that you put into this. And I'd certainly like to thank staff for all the work they do also. I know this was a challenging year for you and for our staff. So thank you very, very much. Really appreciate it. And you brought us good news.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
So we need a motion.
Well,
Councillor Brown? Can't hear you, Vicky.
Unmute. That council approved the Village of Cumberland audited financial statements for the year ended December 31st, 2019.
Seconder,
Second.
Councillor Sullivan, all in favor? Carried. Okay, I'm shuffling papers, so I'm gonna stop doing it when you guys are talking. But next, no unfinished business. Correspondence. Recommend that council receive the correspondence from the Comox Valley Regional District regarding the Regional Poverty Reduction Assessment and Strategy Funding application. Councillor Sullivan. Councillor Brown, all in favor? Carried. Does anybody have any questions or comments? Councillor Brown?
Yes, so I noted in the correspondence that specific community partners were named. I believe the Health Authority and the Coalition. And since this study, is that what it's called? Anyway, since it is looking at food security, I would like to suggest that we add a referral also, or input from, however it's termed, to the Comox Valley Food Policy Council, who is specifically tasked with that outlook, I guess.
That's a good ad. It does talk about the Social Planning Society also.
Yeah.
Group. So Councillor Kettler?
Yeah, I think because the Food Policy Council will be under the umbrella of CBRD, it probably won't have, that's not considered an external agency, but I don't think there's any harm in including that.
Okay.
I think this is good because you know, it's building on the both the childcare study that we did and the housing needs assessment, but also including transportation and food security. So kind of a more holistic plan, poverty reduction plan. So yeah, I definitely support it.
So this isn't after the fact because the deadline was February the 28th for the application.
Yeah.
And so we're just receiving correspondence now asking us to support it.
Yeah, and I did discuss that with staff at the CBRD and saying that, you know, this has happened before where it's an after the fact thing, and it's often difficult for them to get all the councils in permission before the application dates, but they still try. So yeah, that was the response.
Well, you told us this was coming anyway, so that's a good thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, someone like to make the motion then?
That council endorse the village's participation in the Comox Valley Regional District's Poverty Reduction Assessment and Strategy, and support the funding application to the Union of BC Municipalities. And further, that the Comox Valley Food Policy Council be enlisted as a source of input on food security throughout the process.
Seconder, Councillor Sullivan, all in favor? Carried. Next, recommend that council receive the correspondence from the Comox Valley Regional District regarding Regional Active Transportation Plant Grant Funding application. Councillor Sproul and Councillor Kettler. And once again, this is a grant application and they're asking for us to be part of it. Councillor Sullivan.
Sorry. I was just gonna read the motion. I didn't know if we had any more. Looks
I
like
just-
people have some stuff to say.
Two hands have gone up. Councillor Sproul. Take your mic. There you
Yeah.
go.
Yeah, I'm happy to see us do a a regional plan. For a while, we seemed to be out of the loop of active transportation when there was talk of just the Dyke Road being the focus of that group, and this is a much broader stroke. And we've talked about it for many years, so I really hope that this grant funding is successful so we can actually have real connections between all the communities, safe connections, non-motorized.
That does bring up another, we're not an actual voting member, are we not? We did not sign on to it officially. It is not, Councillor Brown, you are the representative on that committee? Yes?
So I did ask Chair Frisch about the Integrated Regional Transportation Committee's input to this, and Jake responded, Jake Martin responded that that because we're an internal group, that we wouldn't be seen, as Councillor Kettler pointed out, that we wouldn't be seen as an external partner, and that our focus was slightly different. So yeah, I'm not, our last meeting was canceled again, and I'm not sure what the future of the Integrated Regional Transportation Committee actually is. So I'm happy to see this. And yeah, and I would love to see it also extend to the study, extend to destination recreation sites such as Comox Lake. As we know, it's an issue for people to get out there in an active transport kind of way. But that's a different matter, I suppose.
Okay, Councillor Kettler?
Thanks, Mayor. Yeah, I think it's been a little bit difficult. That it originally was the cycling committee that I was on that kind of turned into the IRTC, and which Councillor Brown is on. But there's always been the problem of resourcing that committee of funding, because it's not a service, right? It's never been taxed as a service, so it's always been an issue getting proper resources for it. So I think this is a step toward resourcing that committee better, or the work of that committee better.
So Councillor Brown, you will check with them and see what our standing is, because we were participating, but we were not to be acting voting member at that time. If you look at the terms of reference, we had turned them down. Okay.
Oh,
So,
prior to
yes.
it. Okay, sure. Yeah, I'll look into that.
Yeah. So if it, and we had issues with the wording of the previous written agreement, and so that's why we refused to sign it. But now it looks like they're changing what they're doing, so then we can look at it again to see if that's possible.
Okay.
So we'll leave it with you. So someone like to make the motion?
Okay. That the village participate in the Comox Valley Regional District's regional poverty. No, sorry, next one. I don't have it.
Yes.
Andy.
Yes, it is. It's
Was that
on
it?
page 2. Yes.
Active check. Oh, it's the wrong wording in the.
Yes. Yes,
okay.
it is.
So that the village participate in the regional district's active transportation plan grant funding application.
Okay. Yes, you got it right. Okay. Councillor Spruill, second. All in favor? Carried. Next, recommend that council receive the correspondence from the Climate Caucus regarding green recovery and resiliency for local government. Councillor Kettler and Councillor Sullivan. Comments, please. Yes, Councillor Brown?
I was super happy to see this come forward. I haven't been able to participate in the Climate Caucus meetings of late. There's just too many on device meetings. But I think it hits all the points that are important for healthy recovery, including carbon reduction, indigenous health, eco asset restoration, accessible public transit, active transportation infrastructure, local food security, and especially restructuring municipal funding away from property tax so that we are not consistently encouraged to develop in order to generate funding, and that we can actually develop in a sustainable way. Yeah, so and then also moving toward a circular economy, which would create much better quality jobs and environment, and finally divesting from fossil fuels. So I support this wholeheartedly.
Councillor Kettler?
Yeah, basically the letter is stating, we're going to be putting a lot back into restarting our economy and getting back to normal, but we don't necessarily want to go back to the way things were, in the sense that our dependency on fossil fuels and the direction we are headed with, poverty and climate change and those issues. So it's basically a green recovery statement of the things that we could do better as we're recovering from COVID.
Thank you. Councillor Sproul, you had comment?
Yeah, I just want to say we have a chance now to create what many of us have been moving towards, a sustainable, affordable housing. This has given us an opportunity, because now diesel, all the big oil, it seems to be going down, and it's a chance to look at more renewable energy. And this supports what I think our federal government wants to do, is to look at innovation and move forward with a sustainable future.
Councillor Sullivan?
Yeah, this is basically just a laundry list of what Cumberland wants to see, like, in our own community. Like, this is all stuff we've been working towards if we're not already involved in lots of it. But I will disagree with Councillor Sproul. I don't feel like our government wants to divest from the fossil fuel industry, which is the last bullet point there. But other than that, I think we're all on the same page for sure.
Okay, thank you very much. I agree. I think it's perfect timing for this to take place now. And hopefully the government will be listening and taking these into account when they make their decisions. So could we have a motion?
Okay, I'll move that council consider endorsement of the Climate Caucus request to Prime Minister of Canada dated April 16th, 2020 regarding green recovery and resilience for local government.
Second. All in favor? Carried. Next, recommend that council receive the correspondence from the Comox Valley RCMP annual performance plan. Councillor Sproul, Councillor Sullivan. You see here we took it off of last year. We asked for crime reduction and prolific offenders and traffic road safety. One of the things, I wasn't at the meeting last year when this was discussed, but I would like to see us add Comox Lake to this request. We had the Wilderness Society, when they came and made their presentation to us, they did discuss some of the issues they were having with the policing. So I think we need to highlight that there are sometimes that they really do need the police out there, and they need to also be on the lake checking boaters. That can be a very dangerous lake out there, and we need to make sure people are looking after themselves properly. So, Councillor Sullivan, you wanted to say something? Your microphone, yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sure if we're just keep saying the same thing over and over again, but again, is the community policing piece just gone again. I feel like last year this was the same thing, that community policing was left off, and then we had to re-talk to them so that it got put back on, and it seems like it's not there again. Am I missing something?
Their idea of community policing is having a relationship with council. So we need something other than community
Just sending us
policing.
one piece of paper to rubber stamp, is that the great
Well,
relationship that we're-
he will come to
I
the May
understand, yeah.
11th meeting to give his quarterly report. But these are all things that council wants them to look at. We can change them all. We can put anything in there that we want them to look at and be aware of. I know dirt bikes have been a problem in the past, and they
Sure.
continue to be an issue. So if that's what they want 3 topics. If you want to change it, let's do it now. Councillor Brown?
So I think part of the problem is community policing is actually asking them to do something that they're not, that they either don't have the capacity or they're not interested in doing. It's actually asking them to build relationships within the community, not with council, with people and
Mhm.
groups in the community. And maybe what we need to do is set up a meeting between council and whoever, whether it's Mike or some other representative, to actually have an opportunity to have that conversation and what specific things we would see as being part of community policing. And maybe that'll help move this forward, because I understand you guys have asked for this year over year, and it just doesn't seem to happen. So I agree that Comox Lake also is worth adding. And I think so, whether we add community policing in with a definition or a request for a conversation, I'm not sure how we want to move forward with that.
I feel like we absolutely defined that last year, in that meeting. So that's anyway.
Yeah. Well, maybe we need to put it in writing. Councillor Sproul. I'm sorry, Councillor Kettler. I'll get to you in a sec. Take your mic off.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, so the thing, is that right? Yeah. Comox Lake and the traffic issues can be combined into one. Now that the good weather is here, the off-road motorbikes racing down Comox Lake Road, trucks racing each other, mothers on bicycles with a baby behind and one in front. And, people don't they disregard the speeding, and there are still off-road vehicles, which was something that we brought up many times, the motorbikes on our public roads. So that hasn't fallen off the table.
Okay, Councillor Kettler.
I've actually been having weekly meetings with Mike Hervers as part of Comox Valley leaders and the Emergency Operations Center, and they do have a lot more on their plate recently with COVID. So they are dealing with the homelessness encampments. They are dealing with increased property theft and crime, and now they have federal orders to the health orders that they need to also help enforce. So they do have a lot on their plate, but I think it's a great idea to have a meeting with them and to keep building that relationship.
Okay. So the 3 that crime reduction, I think that speaks for itself, and they're going to do that anyway. And so to me, it's something that we could remove and add traffic, road safety, Comox Lake, and ATVs and community policing with what we expect them to do in writing. Is everybody in agreement with that? Okay, Councillor Brown?
So does that leave staff to come up with the definition of community policing, or do we have something already there, or do we need to come up with that ourselves?
I think we all know what it is. Oh,
There's
Clayton, would you like to say something on this?
Well, Your Worship, with the fact that RCMP will be at the May 11th meeting. What we could do is we could define what our understanding from this conversation is, what that might look like, and distribute that to council in preparation for that meeting on May 11th, if that would be what council would wish.
My only concern is there's a time frame for this letter, and I thought it was the end of April.
I know the corporate officer and myself we will confirm that, but I think there might be a little bit of flexibility. I'm not sure, but we'll confirm that if they can wait till May 11th, that would be appreciated from the village's perspective.
Okay, so would somebody like to make that motion?
Sure.
Nobody?
That we endorse the Comox Valley RCMP Detachment Annual Performance Plan Acknowledgement of Consultation and consider providing feedback on community priority issues. Our priority issues being community policing, traffic, ATVs, including ATVs and Comox Lake.
Mhm.
And
Perfect.
look forward to chatting with you May 11th.
Okay.
I don't know whether that needs to go in there.
Councillor Sullivan, seconded? Yes, all in favor? Carried. Next, recommend that council receive the report application development variance permit 4708 Cumberland Road dated April 17th, 2020. Councillor Kettler, Councillor Sullivan, all in favor? Carried. I think this is Karen.
Caroline. Oh, Karen. Yeah.
Hi,
Hi.
you're on, Karen.
Thanks.
Page
Yeah.
57.
Okay. Can you hear me well?
Yes, we can hear
Okay.
you.
I was following you on YouTube, and it's actually a little bit behind. Yes. So this application is for a variance on 4708 Cumberland Road to vary the rear yard setback from the 4.5 meters in the zoning bylaw to 2.6 meters. The applicant is wishing to put an addition to her home to house her members of her family. So it's a 5-bedroom addition. The reason she needs to encroach into, well, to have the setback varied is that you can't just slap on 5 bedrooms onto the back of the house, then you wouldn't have enough windows. You would have to block the windows within the existing house. Hence the layout of the addition is long and narrow and would intrude into that setback. We haven't received any. A letter was sent to the neighbors, and there was no comments were received. The APC recommends to grant the variance, and that's also the staff recommendation.
Councillor Sproul?
Yeah, I'm still perplexed. I asked this question last time. Why do we have, so there is the setback is clear for all to see, and yet a member of the public wishes to construct an addition to the building that is going to be needing this variance. Is it always like, if they know what it is, why don't they keep to that? Is this going to be a pattern that people want to build on a much bigger building than they're allowed because of the setbacks? And does that mean that they can go ahead and build something knowing what the setbacks are? I find that confusing. The second question I asked last time is, this is going to be a huge addition. Is this rooming house? Or I mean, I don't know if staff can find that out, but it seems like a very large addition to need all those extra bedrooms. Anyway, I'm not keen on variances when they could have been avoided by a different design, is all I'm saying.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Brown?
I understand that this is a housing additional family members pursuit, and I think it's not a huge variance. I appreciate that the purpose of having variances come to council is so that we can look at them and the surrounding neighbors and the impact and make a judgment on that. So I have looked at the area. There's a fence between the two properties that provides privacy to the neighbor. And I think, and I don't have any problem with the 2 meter variance or whatever it ends up being.
Councillor Kettler?
Yeah, I'm just confirming with staff that the letter did go out to surrounding neighbors and there was no feedback to date.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the letter went out and there was no comments on the variance, and absolutely the fence probably, you know, helps delineates the property line. So, yeah.
Councillor Sullivan?
Yeah, I also had a look. I share the same concerns with Councillor Spruill. With this specifically, I actually think this is quite a big variance. 2.5 meters is quite a lot of variance. And basically I support this mostly just because none of the neighbors complained. I think I would have issue if the neighbors complained. I did take a look and it seems pretty, maybe there's the reason they didn't complain because there's privacy there, but this is definitely starting. Yeah, I'm with Councillor Spruill. I don't think it's just, we rubber stamp everything, but I have a feeling there will be a time when we're going to say no. And yeah, it would be nice if people just built within the rules, but maybe her family's bigger than average. So I support it, but I definitely share those concerns moving forward, especially as the village starts to get tighter with more people and more ADUs and stuff like that.
Okay, what is your pleasure?
I'll recommend that. Right.
Go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
Oh, okay. I'll move that the council approve the application 2020-01 DV for a development variance permit for property legally described as Lot 2, District Lot 24, Nelson District, Plan VIP 53952, 4708 Cumberland Road, which varies the rear yard setback from principal dwellings from the required 4.5 meters to 2.6 meters, as shown on the site drawing as Schedule A.
Second, all in favor? Carried. Opposed? Carried. Okay, next, reports. Recommend that council receive the, sorry, just did that one. Recommend that council receive the COVID-19 response activities April 6th to April 22nd, 2020 report. Councillor Sullivan, Councillor Spruill. All in favor? Carried. Yes, Clayton?
Your worship, I just wanted to, hopefully the information within the report provides the latest update. Obviously, similar to previous reports, things are changing on a daily basis, but if there's any questions relating to the latest activities or responses from the village, I will note one thing that has updated even since this report is we are commencing our recovery planning, and so that's the reopening of various facilities. We don't know timelines or dates, so that could be weeks down the road, but we're just beginning the planning and preparation so that when and if that does happen, we're in a position to be able to do that. And so we're doing that through the regional EOC as a collaborative approach there. But at this point in time, there's no date or point that we're set to do that. But we're just beginning that process so that we're prepared when and if that happens. So just wanted to provide that update for council.
Is there any questions, Councillor Brown?
Just if you could just elaborate on what actually is included in the recovery plan. Is it just staging reopening collectively, or are there other initiatives coming out of the EOC for economic recovery or other things?
At this point in time, a lot of the planning is in its early phases in the relation to the recovery. So from the business side of things, we're still gaining information, the region as a region, both as a region and locally. So we have sent out communications and surveys to the local businesses, and hopefully that information and feedback will be coming. We're hoping by the middle of or the end of this week to be able to report back to council on what that would look like. So that is in process to find out exactly what the status of all the businesses are in the community, and then we can help through council's direction determine what that might look like. So from the business and economic side, we're beginning that planning but we're still gathering information. From the facility side, obviously we're starting to hear from the province that we're seeing golf courses open, and there's some discussion that there may be other things such as tennis courts and other facilities. So we're just trying to plan so that, at the end of the day, we just need to make sure that we can ensure those facilities still continue to meet whatever guidelines the province has on those. So that's maintaining physical distancing, no gatherings. And so as a region, we're working through that to make sure that when we do reopen and when we're ready to reopen, that we can maintain those requirements that the province has put down on us. But again, none of these dates are set right now. It's just that we're putting in those plans so that, as an example, barriers in the village office, if we're having to put some sort of barriers when people come in to pay taxes, we've ordered those. So we're not just suddenly tomorrow opening up and we don't have those pieces of equipment in place there and signage and so forth. So we're anticipating there's an opening sometime in the near future. Not sure when that date will be, but we're trying to put those steps in place so we're not caught off guard when we're ready to do that.
Okay. Any further questions? No? Then we'll move on. Recommend that council receive the upcoming council committee of the whole meeting report. Councillor Sullivan, Councillor Brown, all in favor? Carried.
Thank you, Mayor Barrett. In this report, staff is looking for three approvals relating to upcoming committee of the whole and council meetings. The first is related to the location of council meetings. Council's procedure bylaw sets out that meetings must be in the council chamber, and this is to make sure that council meetings are held in a public space and everyone knows where that location is. And with the current physical distancing requirements, we're looking to hold some meetings of council and committees in the cultural center, which is a bigger space, and that will help as we go through that recovery and have council has workshop meetings. It'll give more space to have that physical distancing. The second item we're looking for is to hold a special council meeting and a committee of the whole on Monday, May 4th at 2 p.m. This will be a closed meeting. And the third item we're looking for is also to schedule 2 committee of the whole meetings, one on July 27th and one on October 26th. These will be quarterly committee of the whole meetings, regular meetings.
Questions? No, somebody like to move the report then?
I will. I also like to say that I'm really excited to have a meeting with people.
It will be nice. Yes, it would be nice.
Other than the closed one, does that include the public? Is that just for council still? Does it? I don't know if it's
cultural center.
Yeah.
There would be opportunity to have public meetings and public hearings as well. Yes.
Okay. So I'll move it if that's good. I'll move the council authorize holding council committee of the whole and committee meetings at the cultural center, Moncrief Hall, located at 2674 Dunsmuir Avenue during the COVID-19 response period to meet physical distancing requirements. And move the council hold a special closed council meeting and a committee of the whole meeting on May 4th, 2020 at 2 p.m. Further, move the council hold committee of the whole meetings immediately following the regular council meetings on July 27th, 2020 and October 26th, 2020.
Seconder, Councillor Spruill, all in favor? Carried. Next, we go into bylaws. Recommend that council receive the 2020 property tax rates bylaw report. Counselor Brown, Counselor Kettler. All in favor? Carry.
Okay, back here now with property tax rates. So the purpose of the report in front of you is to introduce the 2020 property tax rate bylaw for consideration at this point for first, second, and third reading. And it would be expected that if you do give first, second, and third reading at tonight's meeting, I would bring it back for adoption at the May 11th council meeting. So the 2020 to 2024 financial plan was adopted in January. The revenue in that financial plan of $3.1 million was used to calculate the tax rates, and as well as the revised assessment roll was used as a basis for those tax rates as well. And so the tax rate bylaw must be adopted by May 15th. In order to move forward for 2020. And so just a few things to note with the assessment roll. So the revised assessment roll, the total market value increase in the 2020 assessments for some of the classes created a bit of an imbalance in the distribution. And so the class 6, of course, increased at a higher rate than the rest of the classes. So it kind of put things off balance a bit. And then further, there was an imbalance within the class 6 property assessments. So you have like about 20 properties that increase at a higher rate and at a significantly higher rate than the rest of the properties in that class. And so as far as I can tell, I think it's a market adjustment. I think that probably many of those 20 properties were maybe quite low assessments in previous years. So probably something happened where one of them sold maybe in 2019 or late 2018, and they were all reassessed and adjusted. So they did, all properties have an opportunity to appeal their assessments by January 31st of each year. And so this revised roll that I'm using to calculate the taxes should include any assessments that were appealed and if they were successful. So so the page 72, you see that the average household single family would increase by about $178. And that actually includes an increase of $42 in your utility and your frontage tax increases. So it's not all property taxes. Your strata units are $269, and that's about a $30 increase includes for the utility and the parcel taxes. And those decisions have been made in previous council meetings as well. The one thing is also within class 1, you'll something to note is that the assessments for strata type units actually increase at a higher rate than the single family. So there's a little bit of imbalance caused by that. And then on top of that, there is about 12 units that look like they're going to have huge increases in 2020, but it's just because they only paid partial taxes in 2019 because their whole improvements weren't assessed in 2019. So, you know, they may be quite concerned about that, and I thought I better bring that up and let you know. Also, the BC government has brought in some assistance to businesses and non-organizations because they feel that they've been impacted through the COVID pandemic. So what they've done is they've allowed for a reduction, quite a significant reduction in the 2020 school tax rates for your class 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Those are all your business and nonprofit property type classes. And they've also deferred the municipal tax deadline for those classes to October 1st. Now, you know, that would obviously cause a cash flow in problem for most municipalities. So what they've decided to do to offset that is they are telling municipalities that they can hold off paying the school tax collected until the end of the year. So for the village, that actually does kind of work out. So we have about $1.4 million that we're collecting for other taxing authorities for those classes that we obviously wouldn't collect on by August when they all come due. And our school taxes that we won't be remitting until year end comes to about $1.5 million. So it does help. A little bit else things. We also have to calculate tax rates for the Vancouver Island Regional Library Services, the Comox Valley Regional District, and the Comox Strathcona Regional Hospital District. So those tax rates are in the attached bylaw as well. And so you also have some growth taxes that is larger than what we originally estimated, which happens here. And usually we put your growth taxes into your emergency and public safety reserve to save towards policing. So at this point, there is no change recommended in the tax rate. I would just stay course. You guys have seen this before with the growth taxes. There is also a new section to my report. Just with it being a tough year this year, I thought I could put in some information on your property tax deferral programs. So you have your regular program, and that is for those property owners that are aged 55 years and older, and also those with persons with disability can also apply for this deferral in taxes. That's the regular one that has been going for many years. And then there's also the relatively new one. It's been around for a few years now. It's a families with children tax deferral program. And the village has had one property apply under that program in the past. So as far as I can tell, I have attached information to the report for you to read if you need to, but as far as I can tell, really you just have to be a family that is financially supporting a child under 18 to qualify. The big one with all of these deferral programs, though, is that you have to qualify for the equity part of it. You have to have like 15% equity that stays in your home after all the liens on the property, any kind of mortgages, and also the including tax deferral on it. And then another big one is that you have to be current with your taxes. So you would have to pay any outstanding arrears or delinquent taxes that's on your account before you would be qualified for any of these programs. I also included some alternatives in my report, and you can also direct me to come back with any information as well at a future meeting. And just to understand that the tax rates do have to be adopted by May 15th. So the only other meeting other than this is May 11th. And you would need to read and adopt any bylaws at that meeting all in the same meeting, which you can do under the ministerial order. Or you can schedule special meetings or anything like that. And so I think that's it for me, and I can answer any questions that you might have.
Questions from council? Councillor Kettler?
Thanks, Mayor. Yeah, so just a quick comment on BC assessment. I think that Cumberland is a victim of our own success in a lot of ways, because our assessment values went up for both residents and for businesses. I asked about when BC Assessment came to the regional district about the business tax increasing so much, and whether the fact that there was a lot of businesses that weren't that were for sale, that weren't selling, that were sitting unused for long periods, if that factored into the assessment value at all. But they said yes, but it didn't seem to be the case. So I'm not sure about that. Yeah, so for the regional district, obviously, we took up a larger portion of the tax increase this year because of those increased assessment values. So I just did want to talk a little bit about, you know, the property tax for, well, for both residential and for business. I really think it's important that we try and bring down the tax as much as we can for this year in light of what's happening with everyone's finances. Some of the other municipalities have put off capital projects, and I just don't think that we can do that, because we have basically our water function, that our new water treatment plant that's already being commissioned. We have our sewer treatment plant that we've already got grants for, and it's already being carried out. So there's not a lot that we can defer in way of capital projects. Our fire hall, of course, is due to be completed this year. Yeah, we don't have a lot of options when it comes to deferring capital projects. So I was looking at Michelle's suggestion of the emergency and public safety reserve, the policing costs that we're putting aside for when we hit 5,000 population. And I would definitely like to put that balance that we've got from the additional new taxes, the 59,000, toward that. But I wanted to ask Michelle about what the repercussions would be if we didn't put any reserve away for policing just for this 1 year. If we put that full balance of the 107,000 toward lowering the tax across all classes, and what that would look like, and whether that would require us staff bringing back that information for another meeting.
So through the mayor, you know, the implication, it's a matter of just kind of balancing off the risk of how fast you think that that Cumberland is growing and how fast we're going to get to that 5,000 population. Obviously, we have our next census coming in for the 2021 year, and that would come in to play for the 2022 tax year. I do not see us hitting 5,000 there, but that's just you know, I have no proof that you easily could, but at this point, it probably won't. So really what you're looking at is probably the next census, and that is would come into the 2027 tax year, I believe, because it would be for the 2026 year. And it's possible that you could hit the 5,000 there. I think that you know, leaving out what your question is, just to clarify, is the 59,000 extra taxes plus the 47 that we originally estimated, just not contributing at all this year for that.
Yeah, that's correct. So just not putting anything toward reserves, but using that full 107,000 to reduce the tax burden this year.
Yeah. So I think your reserve is pretty, it's being set up and it's pretty healthy, and it gets quite a hit of interest each year. Really, it's really being used to build your tax increase revenue up to hit that year. So I think the reserve itself would probably be able to handle it. But you're just putting off the inevitable for the tax revenue, like setting aside tax revenue is all. So it's really a council choice. But I think what the biggest issue with the taxes saving for the policing is not really the reserve being healthy enough, because there's going to be more than enough for that, and maybe you'll have some money left over to choose other projects. It's really what it is trying to slowly move and use those taxes to build your tax revenue up, so that you don't have a huge tax increase during that year of when the police come. And you can use the reserve over the following few, like 10, 20 years to bring that revenue in, which is okay. It's just, you're just going to hit it on the other end is all.
Okay. I have a comment on that, but Councillor Brown, go ahead.
So Michelle, I wonder if you know off the top of your head, I wonder how much impact it would make to individual property owners if we did not the whole amount, but the because I think it's important for us to continue to build that reserve. Yeah, I like the idea of reserves and not having huge tax increases over the year. So yeah, the 59.7
for 59 for the residential.
Mm-hmm.
What you're talking about. Yeah, just let me see that. 94. So I think you'd be looking at somewhere between so that increase I talked about, the $178, you'd probably see like a reduction in that increase by about $30 if you use the funds for all classes. And the 269 would probably, you'll see like a $25 decrease to that.
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
Go ahead. You finish.
So I feel like there's spreading it out like that doesn't really make the impact that we would like to see. And I also feel like property owners generally have their property tax built into their insurance or their mortgage, and so that's not addressing really the people who are suffering the most during this crisis. Are not property owners, but renters, and I'm not sure there's anything we can do to help them. But I did think that since it's coming from new growth, that perhaps putting that money aside, the 59.7 over that came in over towards some special project in the newer developments of Cumberland, like something like an allotment garden, or increasing park space or something like that, that would actually serve an immediate benefit. So I'm not sure we're prepared to make a decision on that tonight, but just thinking maybe we want to put that aside to have more impact in a different way.
And I'm going to agree with Councillor Brown in that respect, because I'm very concerned, because we are told that we're going to be hit again with the COVID-19 this fall, and they don't know if that's going to be the end of it. So we could be in the same position that we are right now. And I really think that we need to look after our own financial needs and what's going on in the community. I understand it's hardships for people. I totally understand that. But they said, the Minister Selena Robinson, when she gave her report to us, she said 70% of people were going to be looked after. They either have a mortgage, their taxes paid through their mortgage, there's the deferment program and everything, and the money that they are giving is helping out. So they weren't really interested in looking at any other options. I think we as a municipality need to be very careful about what we're spending our money on. And if it's only going to make a difference of $25 or $30 per homeowner, to me, we're better off to keep the money in our own. Councillor Spruill, you had something you wanted to say?
Yeah, I see both sides of the argument. It would be nice to soften the blow at tax time for the residents, but I am nervous about, is it 2.6 million that we're going to have to come up with for policing in, well, we don't know exactly when, but I think I'd feel better once we were getting closer to achieving that financial goal to then start thinking of community projects. And when we give a tax break to all those 6 classes, I mean, this sounds terrible, but not, some of them don't need it as much as others, you know, like if it was just targeting areas where it'd make a lot of difference to have a 1% tax cut. But anyway, I agree, we have to look after our own finances and be ready with our reserves for when they're needed, rather than a big tax hike then.
Councillor Sullivan, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I don't agree with putting all of our reserve away for sure. I'd be interested in talking about the 59,000 to put somewhere else. I don't know if I'm really ready to, or even we're ready to know where that is, but I think that's a great idea. And even your worship, that saving that even in a contingent, COVID contingent reserve or something, starting something new like that, just to save ourselves down the way, I think is the smarter move right now. And even, yeah, like this, that was my question that Councillor Brown had also. So thanks for that. Just like $30 is not, that's not enough at all, I don't think, to impose that. So that's just where I'm at. I'm interested in putting the money somewhere different for a rainy day, and maybe we figure that out later.
Yeah.
Well, not maybe, we'd have to figure it out later.
Yeah, one of the things that we have to address is how we communicate our council meetings. And you know that Shaw has told us that they're not going to be coming much longer. So we have to put, that is a funding that we have not budgeted for. So there's things like that that are going to come along that we need to address, and we need to have money to make that happen. That's very important to our work. So there's different options out there. That's all I can say. And we can look at different things. So the next step would be does anybody want any more information, or are they ready to take this to first, second, and third reading? Councillor Kettler.
Yeah, I think it's worth bringing back information on the tax impact if we focused it on a specific class. It sounds like there's an appetite to use that 59,000. So could we do that now, or should we bring that back for another meeting? And then
I think we need to get it, Michelle, to bring a report back to tell us exactly what it means and where it would go.
Great.
Michelle?
Sorry, just to clarify, and perhaps it could be a council motion, just so I'm clear. You would like me to come back with information for the 59,000 to go towards reducing taxes, or something else? I wasn't quite sure what you were asking.
You were asking for a specific class, Councillor Kettler?
Oh, okay.
Yes, for a tax reduction. Yeah, I'm not looking to put it anywhere else. I'm looking at how we can lower the tax burden for the taxpayers for this year.
Any specific class, or are you wanting it overall?
Well, I know that it shifts, you know, when we're setting the tax class, but I would focus on residential and business.
Okay.
And sorry, residential and business, and is that the 59,000 or the 107,000 that you're looking at information for?
Well, personally, I would like to see both, and a comparison between those two.
Okay.
Okay.
Anybody else want to see something else in the report? No, someone like to make that motion? Councillor Sullivan?
Yeah, yeah, I'd like to see the options of different ways, where places to put that money. I don't know, I don't fully support the tax lowering, but I do support having the money for a rainy day to deal with stuff that's obviously going to come up this year. And you made a great point, Mayor, about money we don't have to start streaming these meetings. You know, we've got to put in the infrastructure for that. So if this also continues, we're going to need money for that. That's just where I'm at. I'm really reticent to lower taxes. It just doesn't seem like enough to me personally. To like $30 a year doesn't seem like enough to be worth it for me.
Okay, Councillor Brown.
So I'm happy for Michelle to bring back a report showing us what exactly those numbers would be. But I also would just reiterate that I would rather put the 59.7 in a safe place for now in case we need it in the fall or later, or for some kind of improvement. So yeah, I'm not sure procedurally whether we want to give first and second reading, or we're waiting for information, then we're not, or like, I'm a bit lost on where we are now procedurally.
Okay, what I would like to say, I think it would benefit us to show the residents that we looked at it and what it would be and what they would receive in the way of help from the village. And
Yeah.
I think the majority of the residents would also feel the same as we do, that that funding could be used in other places. The $25 rebate or taken off your taxes is not a tremendous amount of money in the overall picture, but I think we need to show that we looked at it and that we're aware of it. Okay, so what we would have to do is make a motion to ask Michelle to bring a report back. Yes, Michelle?
And then, and also, by the time I bring the report back, probably the school tax rates for the residential and the policing will be available. So that will also change the estimate a little bit, depending on if I estimated about a 10% increase for both of those. So, but with our assessments being so much higher than the rest of Comox Valley, our growth in assessment, it could be higher. I don't know.
Okay. Councillor Brown?
Sorry, I have one more question. When we did our budget approval, the amount that we projected, the tax increase amount, was it around 178, or is it dramatically different now that we've seen the roll?
It was very similar for single. I think we did 100 for all charges. We did $170 increase for single family. So this is like 178. But again, that's with an estimate for the school tax and the police tax. It was the strata that really changed. And then the class 6, we said it would be about $460 or something in the village hall meeting. And of course, some of the businesses are going to see a dramatic reduction in their taxes, and some are going to see a dramatic increase. So that one was the other outlier.
Okay.
And then, sorry, for the direction, I would just need to know if council wishes to have this information brought to them at a special meeting in order for them to have time to then be able to direct staff on a tax rate bylaw for May 11th.
What is your pleasure? I don't think you could do it by the committee of the whole meeting. That's asking too much. Is it not?
Committee of the whole is today. When it
Yeah,
starts?
I'm sorry, the next
The May
meeting that we have. May 4th?
I'm fine with a special meeting.
I see.
Yeah. Could we fit it into that?
Not doing too much else these days.
I'll talk to the CAO.
What do you got, Clayton?
Can't hear you, Clayton.
I pushed the space bar
There
there,
you
sorry. We could certainly look towards attempting to have it for May 4th and including that as part of the council agenda there. As long as council, if it's not possible, we'll schedule a special meeting, but we would look to go for May 4th as adding that to that meeting there.
Okay. So you need a motion to that, Michelle?
Yes, I think, yeah.
Yes, I would suggest if we get a motion in relation to bring a report back relating to the impact if these reserves were used for that, reducing any taxation across the various classes there.
So someone like to move that recommendation?
I'll move that the CFO bring back a report on the implications of applying the emergency and public safety reserve to property taxes across different classes.
Did anybody want to add anything else?
I specifically, I think you meant the class 1 residential and the business class, Jesse. So that staff's not doing more work. Or
Yeah, I
less.
just sort of wanted to be able to, between those two specific ones, but maybe we'll just focus on residential. I don't know. It depends what it looks like. So.
Okay.
Is
You
that
want to focus?
good enough direction, Michelle?
Yeah, I think so. And sorry, is that direction for the 107 as well as the 59 that you had mentioned earlier? Or?
No, I think
I would like to see both. Yeah, that's my motion.
Okay. Okay. Seconder, Councillor Spruill. Okay.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if we would be open if the other classes, if we're only helping 2 of the classes, whether the other or just residential, would the other classes think that we were discriminating at not helping them, like light industrial? I know they're getting a break on the school tax, but I just wondered if it would leave us open to objections from the other classes.
That's a good point. So the motion's on the floor. Can we have a seconder to the motion? Councillor Brown, second the motion. Further discussion with questions? Yes, Councillor Sabo.
So with that direction, that doesn't include options for using the money somewhere else. Is that a separate motion for direction?
No, because if we don't use the money, it goes into reserves.
Then at that meeting, then we decide the future of it then?
Well, it can just go into reserves and we can look at it 3 months. Once we've put it in there, we can look at it down the road. We don't have to make the decision right now.
Okay. Then I support that for sure.
I'm right, am I not? That we don't have to, yes, Michelle?
Right. Well, I would bring back a budget amendment to put the rest of the money into the public, and once it's put into the emergency reserve, then it does stay there. It's unless you make a motion or read a bylaw to take it out. But so you would, if you choose at the next meeting not to reduce your taxes with that money, it would stay until a budget amendment. But probably ideally, sometime before that budget amendment, you should probably, decide if you don't want it to go in there to save the time of it coming back as a budget amendment.
Okay, but we could decide that at the meeting, can we not?
Yes.
At the next meeting?
Yeah.
Yes, okay,
For sure.
well,
Yeah.
yeah, okay. So everybody understands the motion and we have a seconder. So all in favor? Carried. Thank you, Michelle. Okay, recommend that council receive the council procedure bylaw amendment report. Councillor Sullivan, Councillor Brown, all in favor? Carried.
Thank you, Mayor Baird. We are bringing a proposed amendment to your council procedure bylaw. There's three amendments that we're bringing forward for your consideration. The first relates to calling a committee of the whole meeting. Right now in your bylaw, council procedure bylaw, committee of the whole meetings, which are meetings where informal meetings where matters are discussed. There are no decisions, council decisions at committee of the whole. The council procedure bylaw says that those meetings have to be scheduled by council resolution. So the proposal that we're suggesting is that committee of the whole meetings be established in the annual schedule of regular council meetings determined by council resolution or can be called by the mayor. And that gives us a bit more flexibility in doing those. But as we discussed, I think at the last meeting, we'll do our best to give council as much time as possible with those meetings. We've also added that agendas be distributed at least 72 hours before the meeting. Previously, it was the notice was only 24 hours for those meetings. The second item for change is to remove the consent calendar. We haven't really been using the consent calendar, which is just correspondence for information. We've got a new system to send council correspondence through the office. Correspondence will still remain on the agenda, and that's typically correspondence that's requesting an action from council. Another change is an addition to rise and report from closed meetings in the minutes, release of in-camera resolutions. And the last item is to allow the mayor to cancel a council meeting rather than it be through council resolution. And there is a limit on that only not 2 consecutive council meetings may not be canceled. So that portion would stay, but it would allow the mayor to cancel a council meeting if there was lack of business or business interruption like we had earlier this month. I'm happy to answer any questions if council wants to discuss that or give the bylaw first 3 readings, and we're required to give notice in the newspaper of those changes.
Just one question, Rachel. This is common practice of most municipalities?
I would say your bylaw is quite restrictive. I've never seen in some ways these restrictions. It's not something I've seen before, no.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Somebody like to make the motion then, please?
I'll move that we give first, second, and third reading to the council procedure amendment bylaw number 1132/2020, and that council give public notice of the proposed amendments to the council procedure bylaw in general terms in accordance with section 94 of the community charter.
Seconder, Councillor Spruill, all in favor? Carried. No consent calendar, no new business. Notice, motions, and announcements. May 4th, 2020 at 2 p.m. special council meeting and committee of the whole closed to the public. May 8th, 2020 at 9 a.m. committee of the whole closed to the public. Question period. Please send questions by email to info@cumberland.ca using subject line question period. Note, please limit it to questions only. Comments will not be read out. And I'm asking Rachel, did we receive any?
We received one earlier today from Kate in regards to the financial statements. And the question is, in the financial report, it shows deferred revenue, which is outstanding DCCs. Why are DCCs not being paid at time of subdivision? And DCCs are development cost charges.
Okay. Deferred revenue does not mean that the DCCs are outstanding. It means that we have collected the funds but have not recorded the funds as revenue yet, because the funds only get recorded as revenue in the year that they are used for the eligible expenditure that they are related to. Deferred revenue includes DCCs collected at the time of subdivision and at building permit for some developments. The process is that the village collects DCCs from the developer, and it is recorded to defer revenue at the time of collection, because we only record the DCC revenues in the year that the funds are spent on an eligible project. I hope that is clear.
Okay, there's one more question. from
Yes.
And Ian has a question about RCMP priorities in the village. And he mentions the town hall that was, I think that was in the fall, about parking and speeding and public engagement. And his question is, has the village requested an annual public forum with an RCMP liaison to hear concerns directly from residents as a priority? Has there been an official update from the RCMP in regards to residents' concerns from the town hall regarding traffic around the school and the community in general?
Okay. We have not made it official, but that's a great idea to have them come and have a public meeting every year with the residents, so they hear from the residents. I think the last one we did was very worthwhile. They had 2 representatives there and they answered questions from the public. And that's always better to hear directly from the RCMP than for us to speak on their behalf. So I think that's a great idea. Councillor Sullivan.
To answer further, I know that they set up several speed traps on Kendall just recently after that and caught a bunch of people. I know people who live there, and I haven't heard back anything since negatively or more complaints about the speeding. I think around the school, well, now that there's no school, that will have to happen next year, but just that they did set up shop there on Kendall a couple different times and handed out a bunch of tickets.
Mm-hmm. One of the reports I got from the RCMP was that they had given out 7 tickets and 6 of those were from residents on Kendall. So it wasn't the drive-through traffic that was speeding, it was some of the residents themselves. It's gone very, very quiet. Even before this pandemic started, it was very quiet in the way of traffic and concerns. But it's certainly nice and peaceful out with not very many vehicles out. Anyone else want to add anything? No? Okay. Then we will go to adjourn to committee of the whole. Recommend that council adjourn the council meeting to the committee of the whole meeting. Councillor Spruill, Councillor Sullivan, all in favor? Carried. Okay. This is the green paper. Oops. I would like to call the committee of the whole meeting of April 27th to order. Approval of the agenda. Sorry, Councillor Spruill and Councillor Kettler, all in favor? Okay. Reports. Recommend that the Camp Road Heritage Character and Parking Requirements Report dated April 17th, 2020 be received. All in favor? Oh, first and seconded, yes. Sorry about that. Councillor Spruill, Councillor Sullivan, all in favor? Carried. We've lost Councillor Brown. And she'll be back.
Is that
Okay.
because of, that she lives on Camp Road?
No,
Or is that-
I don't know whether, I'm sure she'll be back to let us know. Karen.
Yeah, hold on one second. Yeah. Okay, well, I'm just going to, it's quite a meaty report, so I'll just summarize some of the key points. There's quite a little bit of context to this. The objective of this report was to review some options, alternatives for the protection of the character defining elements of the Camp Road neighborhood, which seem to be in conflict with the requirements in the zoning bylaw. So I looked back a little bit of how the current situation came about, and of course Camp Road was workforce housing. That's how it started out, and there was no, it was all on one single large lot, and then a subdivision was laid on top of that to create separate lots for each of the homes on Camp Road. And as that subdivision was layered on top of the existing layout with a standard width road, this was done 1959, it created a situation where the setbacks to the road are super tight, and in many cases are actually encroaching. So I reviewed just using IMAP, and it's a bit of a rough estimate, but I provided some ranges. So I think within those ranges we're fairly close. And it's summarized in table number 1, the existing setbacks. So out of the 50 out of the current 60 homes on Camp Road do not meet the setbacks in the zoning bylaw, which is 3 meters. And out of, in fact, 21 out of the 60 homes on Camp Road encroach into the road right away. For the reason mentioned, the subdivision was layered on top afterwards. And so we actually only have about 8 properties on the north side of Camp Road conforming to the 3-meter setback in the zoning bylaw, and 2 on the south side of Camp Road. So that in itself is not necessarily an issue if the intent is in the long term to increase the setback. But we have that subdivision and zoning bylaw overlay have created a lot of non-conforming setbacks. So and then with the 1999 update to the zoning bylaw, Camp Road residents, actually residents across the village, got the ability to add secondary suites to their dwelling. And then with the 2016 update to the zoning bylaw, they also got the ability to add an accessory dwelling unit on their property. So since that time, since 1999, 6 secondary suites were added. And since 2016, 2 accessory dwelling units were added. So both additions of dwellings to property add a requirement for additional parking on the property. The village has a parking policy is embedded within the zoning bylaw. So when you if you add an additional residence, you require additional parking for that new residence on site. And if you cannot provide on site, then there's a parking cash and lieu requirement. A lot of municipalities have that to be able to upgrade parking within the road right away in the future, which would be off-site parking. So then I just quickly compared, are we creating a situation where we're incentivizing people to lift their home, when they lift their home, to add a secondary suite, which often add to the bottom or to the top, but often it requires lifting the home. Are we incentivizing people at the same time to move the building back to create that, to meet the 3-meter setback, so they don't have to require a variance, and they can potentially accommodate parking on the property. So the costs, it's really hard the cost of moving the home back is generally less than meeting the cash and lieu parking requirements. However, having said that, there is other costs that we can't quantify. There is you reducing the size of your backyard. You also, potentially your grade doesn't actually permit you to do that. Most homes at Camp Road, when they do lift it, have to put in a new foundation. So there's issues with moving it back that it's hard to kind of quantify that in a table. I tried a little bit to give you an idea of what the costs are, but so having said that, since 1999, actually only 1 home was moved back to add a secondary suite. Others may have been moved back for other reasons, but I don't have that information. When homeowners rebuild, they may also build to the zoning bylaw 3-meter setback. And that's the intent of the zoning bylaw, that over time, you actually, properties conform to the bylaw. So then, last year in September, Council adopted a statement of significance that was done for Camp Road, which identified as one of the character defining elements of Camp Road neighborhood that the homes are located close to the road. rather than the larger front yard setbacks that we have in more modern subdivisions. And it creates, it's inviting for people who walk along that road. So it's one of the character defining elements. So the zoning bylaw basically, and the character defining element of Camp Road being close to the front, with the homes being located close to the front yard, to the road right away, the two are in conflict. So I've looked at some possibilities, what could be done about that if the intent is to protect the heritage character of Camp Road, and identified a few actions, which, some are more involved than others, and hence the recommendation to look at this as perhaps something that would be discussed as whether this should be a priority as part of the strategic priorities of council at the upcoming meeting. So of course you have the option not to make any changes. Things change slowly over time, but it doesn't seem to be changing very fast. It does beg the question though of whether the zoning bylaw should not, and the statement of significance and heritage protection heritage features should not be aligned. You could amend the official community plan and the zoning bylaw to take away the ability to have secondary suites, because that's usually when homes are lifted and could be moved back. You could amend the zoning bylaw to establish a minimum and a maximum setback from the road in the Camp Road neighborhood. And if you did that, you could put the setback, say at where you have the largest number of conforming homes, and maybe you just have a narrow area where homes may be moved back and forth within, to kind of protect the character of the existing neighborhood. You could also, the other option would be to amend the zoning bylaw to reduce on-site parking requirements or exempt Camp Road from the requirements, which would probably raise questions of fairness in other areas of the village where this is a requirement, and would probably make more sense to do this as part of a comprehensive parking study and parking cash in lieu study, where you look at it at a bigger level. The next option is also more of a big picture look at the whole situation, which would be as part of the official community plan update, look into establishing a heritage conservation area over the Camp Road neighborhood. And that would allow, as part of that, you might change the setbacks, but also as part of that, you may also look at other character defining elements, because setbacks weren't the only ones to protect that neighborhood. And that would meet one of the objectives of the heritage management plan for the village, which suggested to investigate whether there should be other neighborhoods in the village that are within the heritage conservation area. And it would be specific to that neighborhood. It wouldn't be the same as you have on your downtown core. So all fairly, some of them fairly meaty approaches, others maybe quicker fix, just to change the setback in the zoning bylaw, the current ones, and then look at longer term strategies as part of perhaps a priority of this item. In my opinion, also the media responses, it seems that you would want to involve the neighborhood in those kind of discussions. And heritage is also a value that the village as a whole holds. That's why I suggest that the heritage conservation area discussion would be part of a larger official community plan update discussion, so that the rest of the village that may also have certain attachment to that neighborhood may be able to contribute to that discussion.
Okay, questions from Councillor Kettler?
Thank you, Mayor. I was wondering, most of the problem seems to be on the lower side, and those houses do have lane access. Have we looked at addressing some of the parking issues through that lane access? I know it's not in great state as far as, being able to get vehicles in and out, but if we did improve it, could we address some of the parking issues that way?
I think homeowners who are adding a suite or adding an ADU have that option, so they don't have to provide parking. You're right, they don't have to provide parking on the front of the building. They could provide parking in the back. So that's definitely an option. So they have that choice to choose whether they are able to do that, and that would then they wouldn't have to pay parking cash in lieu.
Councillor Brown.
Does that answer your question?
Sorry, so that option is already available to them?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Yeah. If you have access from the back and you can accommodate a parking spot there, you could put your parking spot in the back.
So a couple of things. The alley access only goes a very short portion of the lower side. But that would be an option for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, like maybe 10 or 12 houses. The other thing that I want to clarify is that even with a 0 setback, there is still room for parking off street because we don't have sidewalks. Like for instance, we have 2 vehicles in front of our house and we have less than a 0 setback on our house. I think you're right, Karen. I think it's really important that the neighborhood be included in this conversation. I know I've talked to several neighbors in the last short while, since the one house got lifted and moved back. And it looks great, by the way. It only was moved back a very short amount, so it hasn't made a huge difference, but there was a consistent row of houses that were still in that original heritage line, and it is disrupted slightly, but it's not as bad as it could have been. So I have heard from several neighbors about, mostly at the top of the hill, about parking. Like parking is a nightmare as these suites come, and I know that there's at least one property owner in that area that's looking to add at least one suite to her current property. So there is concern in the neighborhood around these issues, and also wanted to mention that that the way Camp Road is developed creates a really unique neighborhood feeling where you can't help but meet your neighbors. You can't help but interact with them because you're all faced right on the street. There's no getting into your driveway without seeing anybody. There's no coming in and out of your house without seeing anybody. And that can be a really great thing. And in fact, a cousin of mine who went to UBC and did landscape architecture, her whole class actually did a field trip to come look at Camp Road as a smart growth and community built neighborhood. So I really do feel like it's valuable for us to preserve this street in some way, and I really appreciate the work that's gone into this, Karen. It's super thorough, and the options are very well laid out, and I appreciate the work on it.
Okay, Councillor Sproul.
Yeah, I really like the report. It gives us lots of detail. I looked at all these 5 options, and I can't see we can take away the secondary suite option because people bought with that in mind. That would be unfair at this stage of the game. And also, I cannot see exempting the parking requirements, the increased parking requirements that would come with secondary suites or ADUs, if we are enforcing that in the rest of the village. So those 2 things I'm clear on. I don't support either number 2 or number 4, but I do I do like the idea of the zoning bylaw amendment to establish a minimum and a maximum, but not the full amount. When houses are burnt down, and many have, even in the 42 years I've been in this neighborhood around the corner, those all got built at the setback prior to 2017, which put them quite a bit further back. So that's already happened. Quite a few houses are out of line, but I wouldn't want to see that setback generally so far. The other issue is, oh, got what I was going to say, sorry. Anyway, Yeah, so parking there has to be room. Right now, it's a cluttered, slightly dangerous mess. Sometimes it gets, especially as so many people are working on their homes, and you get the work trucks and the private housing. So I would like to give that opportunity for people, if they're lifting their house, to set it back a little bit for parking. I don't think it needs a lot of space just to get them off the road.
Councillor Sullivan, yes?
Yeah, at the risk of sounding unpopular, also Karen, yeah, thanks. This is super thorough. I definitely agree with Councillor Sproul on some of those points. And I think that starting to change or putting restrictions on Camp Road, as you mentioned, Mayor, is kind of unfair. And Councillor Sproul mentioned that for people who bought their homes to start putting these restrictions on. I think it's a really valid point that Karen brings up, that if we start putting historical designations onto Camp Road and restrictions of what they can and can't do, does that mean that we now move it to BCMU1 and all the heritage homes in the village now and start, like, I really feel like this is a slippery slope. Personally, as far as parking is concerned on Camp Road, I don't live on Camp Road, but anytime I visit, I feel like the houses that have been set back and have created more space and parking, I think that makes it easier for everybody. So I'm kind of on the other end of this, and I'm not interested in making any changes personally.
Councillor Brown?
A couple of things. I think that in the short term, I think it would be prudent to put a maximum setback in place. I disagree entirely. I think everyone who lives on Camp Road knows that they bought in a heritage area because that's the allure of Camp Road. I won't speak for everybody, but I think the vast majority of people who live here understand the heritage nature of the block and would support some kind of, in the long term, heritage conservation area, provided they had input to what those parameters would be. And I think they could be very loose. They could be just about setback or frontage, or like keeping the original layout of the camp house with the porch and the whatever, or some modification of that. So I think there's good reason to take this to the broader community and the neighborhood for conversation on what a heritage conservation area would look like for this neighborhood, and also and I wonder too, I guess a question for Karen is that if we did put a maximum setback, could we also still find a way for people to ask for a variance to do the parking in lieu instead, or some other arrangement? Like, would there still be an opportunity to apply for a variance and change? I assume there would be.
Yeah, for sure. Whether it's a minimum setback or maximum setback, you can apply for a variance. So if they present a design that still fits in, but includes parking out front, but they want a 3 meter setback or 2.5 meter setback, if, say, the maximum was 2 meters, they could still apply for variance. Yeah.
Okay, to me, it's option number 3 or 5. Which one would be the most beneficial to do? 3 or 5 in the options, Karen? Which is the most time consuming?
3 and 5.
Well,
3 or 5.
I mean, the maximum setback, you could do that with the current zoning bylaw update. But if you did that, we're currently not doing consultations, they're more housekeeping. So that's maybe a little bit more than housekeeping.
So you're sort of leaning towards 5?
Well, it's
more work.
I think the maximum setback would protect the heritage character, would make the zoning bylaw more consistent with your statement of significance. People could still apply for variance to have a greater setback. So, you know, I think you have a better read on your constituents potentially than I have. Is this a housekeeping item because you're protecting what is already, most houses would then fit into that setback. So you're actually increasing the conformity of the homes, which is generally a good thing. So from a pure planning and zoning perspective, it's good to have less non-conformative if that's what meets, you know, other objectives like heritage protection.
Okay, Councillor
But
Kettler?
I haven't talked to the neighbors, right? Yeah, so.
Yeah, Councillor Kettler?
Yeah, I think the reason that this report came up was because there was a conflict in, you know, the statements of significance, and we find value in the character of that street versus we also want to densify, and we also want to give the property owners their property rights to be able to densify if that's their choice. So those two things are conflicting right now. But I think that Karen's given us a pretty good recommendation, and it's just above financial implications on page 11, short and long-term strategy. And she's saying, in order to deal with the concern about a loss of heritage character due to homes being moved back from the road relatively quickly and retain the historic streetscapes, council could reduce the minimum setback to 0 meters and add a maximum setback of 2 meters in the next zoning bylaw update. And then the option of heritage conservation area for Camp Road, and possibility that other historic neighborhoods can be explored with Cumberland residents as part of the 2021 official community plan update. And that the cash in lieu, the parking requirements, can then be explored when we do our comprehensive parking study. So all those things give time for community input, and I think do a good job of balancing those two interests that we're trying to address.
Mm-hmm. I really support the protection of the Camp Road. That road is unique to Canada. And we've had people come from all over the place just to walk down there. I know a lot of residents don't like it, but it does happen. But I think we need to keep it and protect our heritage. We've lost so much over the years. And people bought there with the knowledge that it is heritage. And we need to give them the tools to protect it. Councillor Spruill.
Yes, I remember my point from a few minutes ago. I've had concerns of people bringing in houses from elsewhere. I don't know if we have any protection for that. That happened about 15, 20 years ago. A house got brought in. It was an empty lot because of a fire, but it was so not like the rest of Camp Road. And when people rebuild because of a fire, again, not necessarily characteristic, there's sort of trailer type buildings. Those are real concerns to me, that somebody could pull down a Camp Road house potentially and bring in one of those ready to move houses. It's been done.
Yeah. Okay. Karen?
Maybe just to speak to that. So the only way that council could have an influence over that is if there was a heritage conservation area over Camp Road. Okay. So then you can regulate also, you would require heritage alteration permit, much just like in the downtown core right now. So you could set some design guidelines for what the buildings, how the buildings should fit in.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So if someone want to make a motion?
I'll move that council a reduction of the minimum setback to 0 meters and a maximum setback to 2 meters to the next zoning bylaw update to be considered. And do you want to move on this separately? Because I'm going to talk about the heritage conservation area as well.
Yeah, let's do 2 of them then. Okay, so can I have a seconder? All in favor? Sean, are you voting? Counselor Sullivan? Okay, you're opposed? Okay, all in favor? You did that, carried.
Sorry,
Motion is
hang on.
approved.
Oh, sorry.
You want me to take the vote again? Or are you? Because I have you as voting no.
Yeah, I'm really interested to hear what the neighborhood has to say before. I'm gonna just abstain.
You can't abstain. You
Okay,
either vote for.
I'll say no for now.
Okay, thank you.
So just to clarify, I'm referring it to our next zoning bylaw update to be considered.
Then I say yes. Right.
We're very lenient tonight. Can we can we do the vote again so we're all on side? All in favor? Carried. Thank you very much. Now your second one.
I'd like to move that that we consider making Camp Road a heritage conservation area when we consider our 2021 official community plan.
Seconder, Councillor Spruill. All in favor? Carried.
And one
Thank
more,
you.
one more about the parking. I'll move that we consider the cash in lieu parking requirements for Camp Road during our comprehensive parking study.
So we're just looking at them.
Yeah, as
Yes,
part of.
okay. Yeah, okay, seconded by Councillor Brown. All in favor? Carried. Thank you.
Oh,
Next. There was a second part to that. And it was about the reporting to the upcoming so strategic priorities planning session. To tell us how, in order to allow for the assessment of the impact on staff resources and the targeted allocation of those resources to achieve strategic priorities. So we need to include that. Because there will be a cost to this and it has to be budgeted for. So staff will come back with a report.
So do we need another motion for that or?
Yes.
So do we just, so I can make a motion to
Ask staff to bring a report back.
letting us know what the Karen, do you want to talk first?
Yeah, so the idea behind this is that you're having strategic priority sessions. So it's really to look at where does this fit in into the overall number of projects that you want to accomplish in the next little while. So it assigns a priority to it, especially the larger items, you know, looking at the heritage conservation area piece and the parking study, right? So it's an opportunity to discuss where these fit within your list of priorities.
Because I think we're going to have a few priorities.
So I'll move that we request staff to bring back a report on the assessment of the impact of the previous motions, 3 motions, moved by Councillor Kettler to on the strategic priorities to the next, to whenever the May 4th meeting. Is that the May 4th meeting?
May 8th?
May
Eight?
8th. Yeah.
May 8th? Yeah, to the May 8th meeting.
Okay. Seconder. Does everybody understand? We want a financial, how much it's going to cost us to do this reports, and staff time is what we're asking for. Okay. So all in favor?
Do we have a seconder?
Yes, we did, Councillor
Okay.
Kettler.
Okay.
I think I saw your hand go up, did I not, Councillor Kettler?
I was actually wondering if, you know, if that motion was more applicable if we were asking for the heritage conservation area, like right now. Now that we've moved, you know, to piggyback on the zoning bylaw and on the official community plan update and onto a comprehensive parking study, that those things that we were already doing, do we still need to a report coming back on financial implications? Because those are just
Yes.
kind of piggybacking on things that we'll already be discussing.
But it's also on staff time. Is a huge impact on staff's time to do this report. So we have to verify that they have the time to do this. And when could they do it?
There isn't the report already done though?
Your worship.
Yeah.
So the intent here would be with the upcoming strategic planning session, we'll include this as with the other strategic priorities that are already in place there. And then council can give us direction relating to where that fits in the sense of priorities. Yes, some of these do connect with some of the existing priorities, but council at the upcoming strategic priorities will be able to give us if there is any changes, we'll be able to report out to council how that impacts each of those priorities. So on May 8th, we'll have this as part of the list of activities and how those are impacted, and then council can give direction on that.
That's why you have the motion to forward it there.
Yeah, the intent originally, council's definitely got very specific in some actions here, which is great. That's fantastic. It gives us clear direction. At the beginning there, we didn't know exactly what council's direction would be, but this gives us a lot clearer direction on what council's seeking. So we'll be able to pull that information together quickly. I don't believe any of the reports are ready. But correct me if I'm wrong, Karen, but I don't believe any of those reports are ready in relation to next steps for the zoning bylaw or OCP. Like we don't have any of that completed. That's in, you know, down the road there. So we can include these in as action items within those areas there.
Okay. So the motion is that the one that you read out. So is everyone in favor of forwarding this on to our workshop?
I think what Clayton's saying is we don't need to,
Okay.
that it will be discussed there now that we've given more specific direction.
Okay.
Yeah, I think because this is a little more specific, I think we're okay. Staff will include this as a strategic priority discussion on the 8th. So.
Okay. Just making sure we're covered here. Next, recommend that the Heritage Protection Tools for Local Governments report dated April 17, 2020 be received. Councillor Brown, Councillor Kettler. All in favor? Carried. You're on again.
Yeah, heritage is big tonight. So I'm just going to, it's quite, there's quite a lot of detail in this report. As you see, there's quite a few tools at local government's disposal to protect heritage. What I was going to do is just perhaps briefly go over the table, the summary table. It gives you a nice overview of all the different tools that we have. And then perhaps answer questions. I think the way I understood the resolution is that, you know, how do we move ahead with next steps? So if we want to protect, have a stronger protection of our heritage in the village. So some of the tools that we have are more sort of for just initial inventory tools, like the Community Heritage Register. It's really just to understand what's there. It also provides opportunities for education and understanding the values better than how you can you integrate that into planning. The same with the heritage recognition tool. That's really posting a plaque with the permission of the owners. It's largely an educational tool. Heritage inspections allow, even if it's something just on Heritage Register, it does allow, say, the Heritage Committee or or planning staff to request seeing the interior of a building or having the values documented before something might be altered or demolished, and then allows for next steps. A heritage impact assessment really just takes that one step further. There's also a number of heritage protection, temporary protection measures, which do not prevent demolition of a heritage building. It just stays it for a certain period of time. And partly it's to allow the village to document heritage value, but then also to potentially enter into discussions with the owner of how the property perhaps could be protected, maybe negotiate incentives for the protection of the property to make it work for the owner to keep it. So a heritage control bylaw really is similar to that. It allows while you're doing in the midst of a planning process, you can stay a demolition. So the stronger tools are really the last ones there: heritage revitalization agreement, heritage covenant, a heritage conservation area, which we have in the downtown core, and heritage designation bylaw. So we don't really have heritage revitalization agreements right now. They're voluntary. Voluntary, I mean, the owner has to be a willing participant. And you can enter into these, and they are often to give incentives to the owner and agree on a set of incentives for them to keep a heritage building. If someone, say, came forward in the downtown core and they want to tear down a valued heritage building, you could suggest entering into an agreement to keep it, and then the village would potentially provide some concessions, perhaps increased lot coverage, so they can put something in the back of the property that allows them to keep the building and make it financially viable to keep it, or it's some benefits, a tax exemption, those kind of incentives. You can then discuss that, but it's voluntary on the part of the owner. A heritage covenant is like a environmental protection covenant, similar idea. You registered a covenant on title that protects the property or the site in perpetuity unless both parties on covenant or decide to dissolve the covenant. So it's entirely voluntary, and it doesn't necessarily you can't put incentives into a covenant. It's just an agreement on title. Heritage conservation area we already have for the downtown core, as I mentioned. It provides for some level of protection. It protects more the form and character, and of course it helps to have good design guidelines that identify what that form and character is, but it doesn't protect the actual building. So a building can still be demolished. It requires a heritage alteration permit, and that can regulate what gets rebuilt or how what gets put there looks, but it doesn't prohibit demolishing it. You can stay it up to 6 months. And then the strongest protection measure is really heritage designation bylaw, which we have in a few cases: the cemeteries, the post office, and the memorial arch, I believe, off the top of my head. And that does prevent demolition without a heritage alteration permit, but the demolition could be denied altogether, I guess, in that case. Sometimes we don't have that in our heritage designation bylaws. There would be maintenance requirements written into the bylaws to maintain the building in good shape. So there can't be sort of willful neglect of the building. So we don't currently have that, but yeah, that's really the strongest form of protection. Oh, if you do that you can do that without an owner's consent, but you do, the owner then has a right to apply for compensation if there's a loss of value of the property as a result. So, and they have 1 year to apply. So there's a risk associated with passing heritage designation bylaw without the owner's consent. It may not lose heritage, it may not lose in value. It's really hard to know. Some heritage has a certain attraction. I would think for the post office, there's a lot of value in keeping it to the owner as well. So that's kind of your set of tools. Yeah, and again, we're similar to the previous report, going a little bit deeper into these or pursuing them more actively than we have. They're all identified in our heritage, in our OCP actually, as desirable tools to use. They're also in the heritage management plan. Actually actively pursuing does take time. we could, I listed a few action items that we could take. So we're suggesting that this is also discussed during our discussion of priorities at the upcoming Council Strategic Priorities meeting. So you can decide how high this is on your list, what we should be pursuing. Should we actively contact neighbors with valued buildings? Do we work together initially with the Heritage Committee, determine who those would be, and seek, for example, heritage revitalization agreement? So yeah, I'm open to questions.
Someone have some questions? Member Council, Councillor Sproul?
It's not so much a question, but it's just I want to say how much I value this table, because we, some of us in Cumberland have when we want to ask people if they would have certain restrictions on their heritage building, we know that we have to give some kind of compensation. And I've always said, well, Cumberland can't afford to do that. But I think now, given the times, and that is just something that we really have to consider. Yes, we have to give concessions. Either the best one would be to allow some kind of development, a accessory dwelling unit or something, but not financial ones. I don't think we can give tax exemptions. So we have to come up with something that works for us and for them. But I do think it's time to start thinking about that. I see, because that is our future, is having our heritage. And if we lose any of those buildings, especially those major ones on the main street, it will be an absolutely crippling blow.
Councillor Brown?
Yeah, I really appreciate this report, and I think it outlines, 7 easy steps to take our not just the Heritage Committee, but heritage preservation in the village to the next level for relatively low cost. And I think Gwen's right there. As development pressures continue to increase in the village, we need to make heritage a priority, and we need to start identifying what that looks like and preserving some of these. I'm not a huge fan of big swaths of heritage zones, but specific buildings or specific neighborhoods, I think, are really appropriate and help. Thankfully, we've had lots of people whose, for instance, the houses, I'm not going to remember which street it is, but in the downtown core that burned down, and they were rebuilt in a beautiful way. Thank God, because we had no real way of asking those property owners to do that. So I think getting some of these things in place would really facilitate that moving forward. And I'm happy to work with those 7 next steps.
Mm-hmm. Anyone else? I'd just like to comment that I think we've been very fortunate in the residential part of this, where people have come in and bought the heritage houses, and they look almost the same as before they did the renovations, especially on the outside. They've really took care to keep the heritage values of those homes. So I think we need to move on this, and I've always been told to do it before you become a place where people want to come, because the new developers will not protect the houses. They'll just want to tear them down and build new. And so I'm really glad to see this report. Thank you very much. Councillor Sullivan, did you have something you wanted to say?
Yeah, just as opposed to my last comments on the last report, I absolutely value our heritage, and I totally support this moving forward for sure. But I just, baby steps, and I definitely support this moving forward.
Okay, so the motion is there. Someone like to?
Can I just comment as well? I think that the heritage conservation area for Camp Road is a great idea, especially as going through the OCP, so that there's lots of community input to support it. And then, you know, the heritage designation bylaw maybe for more specific buildings that we really want to protect around the village. Yeah. Thank you.
King George. Sorry.
Go for it. Who's going to report? I mean, make the motion. It's quite lengthy. Could I ask somebody to please move the motion?
Okay, I'll move
Okay,
that the committee of the whole provide direction is, oh, no, that's not it. Yeah, it is.
Page 2, page 2.
I'm on page 2. Oh, we did provide direction. Okay. Information. We will input. Okay, I'm not sure if I'm reading this properly then. Is the most provide direction to staff, which we did.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So, okay, I move that we implement the heritage protection tools for local governments reported dated April 17th, 2020 as part of the upcoming council strategic priorities planning session in order to allow for an assessment of the impact on staff resources and targeted allocation of those resources to achieve strategic priorities. Woo.
Oh, yeah.
Seconder, Councillor Brown, all in favor? Carried. Next, recommend that council receive the corporate strategic priority quarterly report, January-March 2020. Councillor Kettler, Councillor Brown, all in favor? Carried. You guys keep on moving. Chairs. Clayton.
I had to turn my light on. It's too dark for me to see.
Thank you, Worship. So attached to the agenda is the quarterly report for the strategic initiatives that are currently part of the corporate strategic priorities. What I just wanted to start out by mentioning within the report, I want to start out by saying this is something that I've been certainly working towards. However, due to the last number of weeks here, maybe we're not quite to the point where a full strategic update is prepared and ready, as well as the quarterly reports that I would like to present. So I did note within the report there that the objective is to have the building permits and development activities updated during these quarterly reports, protective services, a financial update. Another one that's been discussed is even RCMP activity. That's another one, or any reports. We will also be including the council resolution, so the action list and activities relating to that. So the intent is during our next quarterly update, I'll be able to provide that full update. The goal here is to provide a snapshot of where we are, how things are proceeding, if there's any impacts relating to some of the initiatives or activities that are happening. The goal also is to post this information both for council as well as the community to be able to actually see where things are if they have questions. So after these committee of the whole meetings and reports, we would upload those to the website for the community to be able to see. What I'll do, if it's okay, just before, if I can certainly answer any questions relating to any of the projects or any activities, but the actual sheet on page 28 onwards is just a snapshot. This is an early phase of this, and I certainly would seek any feedback or any information that council is looking to have included into this report. But the goal here is just to outline where we are with the strategic initiatives, and certainly with our strategic priority session coming up in a couple of weeks, what's on here may shift a little bit because we do know there's some emerging items such as the COVID response and some that we've discussed this evening. But the intent here is to list off, the status, are things in progress. If there's any concerns, we'll identify why those, if there's some issues, timelines, budget, or any activities that need to be reported, we'll report out any of those ones that are not meeting the defined criteria that has been laid out. And also just identifying when the completion date is and which department's responsible, just so you can kind of get a picture of exactly who's working on what in relation to the strategic priorities. So I just wanted to again emphasize that this is a starting point for us, but there's some more levels to this that we'll look to add in the coming months, and open up to any questions or comments that council has relating to this report or future reports that you'd like to see.
Councillor Sproul?
Yeah, I just want to say, I forget sometimes when we're in meetings like this that we're actually in the middle of the COVID crisis, and that throws a huge unknown into future plans. We're carrying on, I mean, we're making our plans based on last year's and amending them, but we really don't know how much staff time, how much energy generally to get back into and develop a return to business as usual. This is a huge thing. And I think we have to be really mindful, as we always hear and we all know, staff time. You know, it maybe things don't cost us, it's maybe not the cost that's prohibitive, but our staff is being stretched very thin. Anyway, we'll have all these comments when we get closer to the time.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Oops.
No? Okay, thank you very much. Oh, Councillor Brown?
Sorry, I put my video off instead of unmuting. I really like the format, Clayton, and I like the additions that you talked about as well to the report. And so you said that you would do this quarterly?
That will be the objective. I think
Yeah.
Based on when we're talking about capacity and to bring this information together. I know in the past, some of these reports have been monthly, some have been quarterly, some have been more annually. Talking with staff, we believe that on a quarterly basis, we can provide a very detailed analysis of where we are with projects. So that will be the hope. And certainly if things change, we can have a conversation with council and provide any information. But I believe quarterly would be realistic for us to be able to deliver on this.
Yeah, so we would also get Michelle's financial updates at the same time. Yeah.
Correct.
Beautiful.
Yeah. And the objective would be during the committee of the whole for these type of discussions, we can put all that information forward. And if there's questions, so that's also the other objective of having a committee of the whole. So.
Great. Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay. Question period. Please send any questions by email to info@cumberland.ca using subject line question period. Note, please limit to questions only. Comments will not be read out. Rachel, did we get any comments? Nope.
No
Okay,
comments. No questions.
thank you very much. Could we have the motion then? Recommend that council adjourn the committee of the whole meeting and reconvene the regular council meeting for the closed portion of the meeting.
Second.
Councillor Sullivan, Councillor Kettler, all in favor? Carried. Okay. Now we're going to go in, open back into the regular council meeting, and we're going to go into.
Your worship, sorry to interrupt. Can we just wait till I think the recording, the corporate officers just turning off the recording of this. So we'll just confirm that's done.
Well, we have to
We
read
have
the
to adjourn
closed
still.
portion.
Sorry, my
We have
fault.
to read the closed portion. Okay, someone like to read the closed portion?
I'll move that council close the meeting to the public pursuant to section 90 of the community charter to consider labor relations or other employee relations, discussions with municipal officers and employees respecting municipal objectives, measures, and progress reports for the purposes of preparing an annual report under section 98 annual municipal report.
Okay, thank you. Seconder, Councillor Brown, all in favor? Carried, and motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Councillor Sullivan, Councillor Brown, the last one of the night. All in favor? Great, carried.